Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of appropriate ages, get ready for another episode of AZA Commander Podcast. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the AZA Commander Podcast, where we talk about the Magic the Gathering Commander format. My name is the Zombie Apocalypse, and there's a rumor going around that I'm actually Saffron Olive. I know I now have visual evidence to prove otherwise.
We do, and you can all see it right here. Hello, my friends and occasional opponents. I'm Jetterex, but in Chicago they pronounce it Tim, and I don't know how they get that out of it, but
that's crazy.
Today on the podcast, we're going to tell you all about our experience at Magiccon Chicago.
So we want to remind you before we get started, or the best ways to support the podcast is to follow us on your favorite podcast listening apps and to watch this and other videos on YouTube and tune into our streams on Twitch. Links will all be in the description below. Tim, tell us what we are doing today.
So recently, we had the honor of attending Magiccon Chicago, and by honor, of course, I mean we paid for tickets and everything else that went to it. Devotees will remember that our first podcast episode was about our Magiccon experience in Philadelphia last year. So in the spirit of being super repetitive and gushing about rubbing elbows with other content creators and Magic players from distant lands, today we're going to tell you all about our trip, the venue, the people, the food, the cosplayers, and of course the games. After that, we're also going to talk a little bit about about our future as content creators. But before we enter the battlefield, let's check in with our human resources department, who are looking to bring on some new team members.
Now hiring. Our team is looking for an enthusiastic and passionate new employee to assist us in our newly established evidence collection department. Applicants must have experience as both a private eye and a wizard, must be located in or near the Chicago area and be proficient in both ice magic and fire magic. Positive candidate qualities include an aversion to technology, solid connections with local law enforcement, and a clean criminal record. Those with poor emotional control need not apply. Candidates must provide their own uniform, including a leather duster and accompanying hat, even if in the books you really don't like hats. Submit your resume at www.definitelynotaDresdenFilesReference.org and join our ranks today.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read a book about this guy before.
I feel like it seems really familiar to me.
Anyway, so really the first question that you have to ask about going to an amazing place like Magiccon Chicago is, what were the goals going into the event? Like, what goals did you have?
So, learning a lot from last year. I'm a convention goer of a lot of different types. Other than just, gaming, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different convention style things that you can go to, and they all have their own flavor. They all have their own kind of vibe. And once we went to Magiccon Philly last year, I think we had a much different sense of what it was going to look like, what the landscape was going to be, and what you could get out of the event. So this year, my number one goal was to get in as many paper games of Commander as I could, because I really just don't. I don't get a lot of paper games in my day-to-day life right now, and there was just something about that experience that I really wanted to lean into, and I wanted to make sure, this was a goal, a kind of a holdover from last year, is that I wanted to make sure that I played every deck that I took with me, because I didn't last year, and it was definitely a holding point for me. So how about you? What were your goals going in?
So my first goal was to offload a whole bunch of my trading stuff. I had 3 full binders worth of stuff that I just didn't have a use for. I don't go to a local game store because, working all the time. So the opportunity to trade, the only person I trade with is, sitting here next to me, and we don't even get to do that very often. So,
really?
Yeah. So the first opportunity was to offload as many cards as I can, and then the second one was to bump elbows with as many content creators as possible, and I wanted them to sign as many cards as possible in my Door to Nothingness deck to make my Door to Nothingness deck as personal and like unique as possible. And those were the 2 main ones. Again, I also wanted to play a lot of games as Magic, so I think our goals were pretty well aligned on that second half there, of the trip, and yeah, I had a blast.
I guess one of the things that I really like about something of this size is that you really can have different goals going in and have unique experiences that are just as fun or just as rewarding, maybe depending on the individual. Because you could ask another half dozen people what their goals going in were, and then you might actually get some different answers from them than you get from the two of us. And I think that's what makes something like this if it's run well, if it's done, if everything comes out the way that it's meant to, I think you end up with a lot of different opportunities for a lot of different experiences. So, how well did you meet your goals?
Well, to start off, I met my goals like spectacularly. I offloaded like 2/3 of all the cards that I had. I made a lot of money off those cards, and I didn't have to bring in a dime beforehand. Like all the money that I made, and I still have money left over. Like I haven't even spent it all yet. Like so, like I finished building a deck. I bought some expensive cards, and I still had money left. Like I still have money left over. So like that goal was absolutely went perfectly. Uh so I did bump a lot of elbows with a lot of content creators. I actually had some content creators subscribe to the podcast like right in front of my face, which was one of the coolest things ever.
Yeah.
And I don't like I have a stack of cards. All these cards here were signed by content creators, and I had a rule. So the rule was I you were not allowed to sign more than one card at a time. But if I saw you multiple times, you're allowed to sign a second card. So I did get a couple of re-signatures and stuff, but like man, I met a lot of people, and it was one of the coolest things ever. So, how well did you meet your goals, my friend?
I think mine were lower barrier for entry than yours because I think that when you talk about going to an event like this and trying to spend time with I'm going to use the word celebrities here, and even in our circles, there are, it's not the same thing as if you went to, say, a large Comic Con and you have television personalities and things of that nature. Here we have YouTube stars, some of whom are gigantic, even in the scope of YouTube, but most of whom really aren't. Most of whom are just like kind of niche content creators doing this very specific thing. We know who they are.
Yep.
But the next person over, and really even the most popular Magic content creators, they're still very, very narrow in what they're creating content for. So, but what's neat about this is watching how responsive so many of them are to just saying hi and having a quick drive-by conversation with somebody or signing cards for somebody. It's very cool to see how down to earth so many of them are. As far as meeting my goals, just like you, I really knocked it out of the park, which is not to say that I did anything special. I went in with a specific mindset. I had a very clear idea of what I was going to use this time for, and I was effective at doing that. I think the deck choices that I made this year was like I went in with a handful of decks that I really loved playing. So there was never a moment where I was like, oh, I don't know if I really want to play this one, because there's some feel bads there. I just did it and had some really profoundly positive experiences as a result. So my goal is to play a lot of games. I think I mapped it out. I took 6 decks. I played each of them at least twice.
That's pretty stellar.
So it really is, and a lot of the games were super fun and kind of matched up well enough that they didn't end very quickly.
Right.
So really, those were mine going in, and I definitely felt the same way that I met them pretty well.
So, what were some of the positive things that you experienced while at Magiccon Chicago?
Other than what we've already talked about, I actually thought that I thought that the event venue was, we talked about this a lot last time in our very first episode. We talked about food, right? And I thought that the food offerings that they had right there in the conference room were solid. They
Way better,
weren't
yeah.
anything yeah, they weren't anything to write home about, but there was enough uniqueness, like 3 different options, I think,
Yep.
that you could actually hit several different points around the room. But they had coffee available, and they had donuts available, and they had, these other kind of just easy pickup things as well. So all of that amounted to, I didn't feel like it was a huge effort to leave the area to kind of take a break from what I was doing to eat or to do something else. I really loved they had the murder mystery thing for Murders at Karlov Manor set up, and I didn't ever get over to do it, but I really visually loved that it was there in the room and it was an option that people could use. I thought the vendor area was pretty good as well, as far as like, the way, as far as out as they had it spread out. I had some I don't know if complaints is the right word, some notes about the way that they could have set up the center altogether, but still I thought that those things were generally good. So how about you? What comes to mind immediately when you think of like the most positive parts of it for you?
All right, so the most positive part of my experience was I actually got to play a game with Saffron Olive. Like, you can't really get much more positive than that. And like, man, let me tell you, Saffron Olive, he is one of the most down to earth guys. Like, I just saw him walking by, and I'm like, I just finished a game. I real quick packed up my stuff, ran up to him. I was like, hey, yo, do you got time for a game? He's like, absolutely. So, and then we start walking around looking for a place to sit, and I was like, oh, let's go out to the free play area by the Pro Tour area, because there was a lot of tables there because like the command zone area was completely packed. Finding a table was almost impossible. So we go out there and we're like, oh god, there's no tables here either. And he was like, do you just want to sit on the floor and play? And I was like, if you're down with it, I'm down with it. So we got to play a game of Magic on the floor with Saffron Olive. And the fact that like he actually got to see my door deck operate and was like, this is one of the coolest decks I've ever seen. Like when you have someone that you look up to tell you that the deck that you built is really cool and wanted to see it go to completion, is one of the coolest things that could ever happen. So that was the most positive experience.
There's so much to love about that story. Like, I love that at some point it was just like, let's just sit on the ground. Because, boy, you just immediately kind of harken back to those days when we were kids, and that's exactly what we were doing.
Absolutely.
And there's just something, like, when you talk about down to earth, that's such a, like, very literal interpretation of it. Like, here's somebody who's 100% willing to sit on the carpet and just flop out cards and play in that way. There's just something really remarkable about that, and I think that experience, along with a lot of the other, like as you said, rubbing elbows with other content creators, like generally speaking, they were just delightful to communicate with, just in whatever context it happened.
The funny thing about that is, so it ended up being an Emperor game, which is a separate format of Commander where it's 3v3. There's like an Emperor in the middle, and then you have your 2 lieutenants. He actually ended up seeing 3 of my Commander decks, which was kind of funny because some of the people that tagged along didn't actually play Commander, but they wanted to play with him anyway. So I was like, I have plenty of decks you could choose from. So he actually got to see my Indominus Rex Alpha, my Garth One-Eyed, and my Runo and Stormkirk deck, which I thought was mildly amusing.
Yeah, so it really is. It's amazing that, to hear again about a content creator being so positive, but also that like you had a unique kind of game and it was on the floor. There's just what a great experience.
Yeah, he was a wonderful person to play with. But yeah, seriously, like just all the content creators that I met and they were just super positive about everything. They were like, keep up the great work. Like a lot of the content creators, like I was mentioning that, like, hey, I'm a small, podcast creator, and I just would love for you to listen to it to see what you think and everything like that. And like the guy from the Spike Feeders, I forget his name right now, I'm drawing a blank, but like he was like, oh, what is it? And grabbed out his phone, like found it on his like podcast app, and hit the subscribe button right in front of my face, and that was like just made my day.
And really, it's such a I watch enough YouTube and listen to enough YouTube creators across the board, not just Magic, but other things as well. And I've heard all of them talk about this, talk about how like you can do this one thing, because they talk about it in terms of subscribing to their channels, but it works in reverse as well. Like as somebody who is a creator, you can subscribe to something, and it's really going to have that powerful positive impact for somebody.
Right.
I did want to mention again, since you brought it up earlier, about the big shops like Cool Stuff Inc. or Card Kingdom, or the big kind of more noticeable or more known entities. They have infrastructure set up there to be able to turn cards over in a way that makes it more approachable, which is what allows you to kind of turn out a handful of the mid to higher level cards, and that you're going to get most of the value for it, because we have to recognize as Magic players that we tell ourselves that a card is worth X amount of dollars, right? But the fact of the matter is that it's only worth that amount if somebody gives you that amount for it. Right. And so we have this like very funny sense. I'm more guilty of this than most. I really am. Like, I just pulled a $20 card. I'm so excited with myself. It's not actually worth $20 unless I give it to somebody and they give me $20, right? So, but what you get at these, at these kind of bigger, these bigger stores is you get almost you get a larger percentage of that number that you're imagining in your mind than you would if you just traded it in other situations, or, and I think that the barrier, at least for me, a lot of the time is I don't want to go to the work of selling my cards individually. I don't want to do any of that. So this is a really good option for that. And I really appreciate how good their infrastructure is, because I watched you go through it and I did it back in Philly, and we actually used the same service.
Which was funny. It was the same guy too, wasn't it?
It was the same guy. Yeah. It was. But boy, it was super easy. It was so super low intensity, super low pressure. They weren't trying to poach cards from me. It was very much like, I'm going to point to a card. You tell me if it's yes or no. Every time you say yes, I'm going to pull it out of the binder and put it where it goes on the board. And they just kept doing that the whole time. And then it became a conversation. It was very friendly. And it made it very easy to do something that is otherwise very difficult. And I really appreciate that, that they have the infrastructure to do it, and that they actually had those folks open later than the rest of the area.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
So let's flip the coin a little bit. Give Magiccon Chicago some of our notes. I'll let you go first here. What are some things that were maybe not so positive that you think could have been better, or things that didn't go well?
Okay, so there's two things I have in mind here. The first thing was I wish there was a bit more space, because in Magiccon Philly there was never a point in time where it's like you can't find a table. Even if you wanted to escape and just get some space, it wouldn't have been a problem. In Magiccon Chicago, everything was filled to the gills, which is a positive in the sense that there's a huge variety of people to play, but like it was also like once it was hard to find your first seat, but once you found your seat, you were fine. But the second main negative experience that I had was day one, I ordered some pizza, right? And I'm sitting down in the lobby and I break my toe. I stubbed my toe so hard on like a stone like chair or table or something that I am still limping because of it. Like that's how bad I stubbed my toe.
Yeah, Magiccon Chicago, or the Magiccon event planners, they really need to do a better job at making you not break your toe.
Especially in the hotel lobby. Yep. Yeah,
they need to do way better at that.
Yeah, that was the only negative experience. Other than that, Magiccon.
That's really isn't that really saying something though? That like, and again, the space thing, because this is definitely on my list of things that they could have done better. But it's such a it's such a double-edged sword to use a terrible cliche. Meaning that when you are the event coordinator, meaning both the event center that hosts it and Wizards or whoever they have in charge of hosting the Magiccons, they're incentivized to make it as full as possible. They don't want to close off registration at any point. They don't, and they're really not going to do that if unless the number is so ridiculous. And really, so having a situation where you have more people than you do seats is what you want, because it makes it feel like exclusive, and it makes it feel like it is, that you have to kind of fight to be there. But when I say it's double-edged sword, the other side of that is somebody could very easily walk away from the experience with I paid all this money to get in here and I can't even get a chair. And that there's some bad feel associated with that as well. So there's a Goldilocks zone, like everything else. There's a spot here, and I actually think that our experience in Philly shows the other end of that, where they had so much space that it actually felt like more than they needed, way more than they needed, right, as a matter of fact. And so, how do you find the middle ground? And I'd be very curious to know, because let's face it, the beginning of 2023 still felt very different than the beginning of 2024 in terms of going to large events in the community. Yeah. And just for contrast here, there was a mask policy when we went to Philly a year ago for COVID protocols, and there wasn't in Chicago. And it was very clearly a much larger event in a larger city,
way larger,
but those things weren't there. And regardless of where anybody lands on that, my point is actually that the general feeling of safety and the general consensus of what's okay and what's not okay, and so all of that to say, I'd be very curious to know if they were able to identify approximately how many people attended. And I'd like to know what the difference is, because to me, with all of the space that we were talking about, it actually just felt like the attendance was way higher.
Right. Let's see if Google has an answer.
I could be wrong, because it's not putting the same number. It isn't using the same space and then seeing how many people are there. It's a different space and then seeing how many people are there. So very hard to tell if in fact that there were more people there or not. So I actually thought that they could have used the space better.
I agree.
They had it split down the middle, where one half of it was where the vendors were and where the some of the other things that weren't going to go on into the evening, and the other half is where the play area was. And what this ended up resulting in is that there was at least some parts of the room that felt like there was some dead space that then got partitioned off part of the way into the evening because those vendor areas were closed. And listen, I want the vendor areas to be secure. I want the vendors' wares to be safe. I want that. But I think that they could have organized the room differently in such a way where they probably could have had more tables in the command zone, because I just think that there's an enormous amount of people that are there to do that. There's an enormous amount of people who want to go, like me, who want to go and sit in the command zone and play as many random pickup games as I can with as many passerbys as I can in the time that I am there. And if I have to I kept comparing it to being in a very full parking lot where you really just had to keep driving around until you saw a car pulling out, and then park yourself in their chair as soon as you could and just sit there.
Right.
Which is really tough for somebody like me. I don't want to force myself into a situation. I know I'm not alone in that. I'm sure that kind of dynamic is difficult for other people as well. So that could have been a little bit better. But again, I understand why. They want it to be that full. They really do.
Oh,
so I can't really fault them for that.
Right.
It just comes out that way. I honestly, as far as other things go, I don't know that I think I will always say this. I always want there to be, I always want there to be more vendors that are selling things that aren't cards.
Yeah.
I want there to be more vendors who are selling unique kind of merchandise, or unique
this awesome
apparel
deck box that I got.
That's right, exactly like that. And there was more of that this year than I remember there being last year. And I have friends who are vendors at kind of nerd conventions, and they're very careful about what they pick for this specific reason. And there's also a question of how much does it cost to be a vendor at one of these things, and do you really think it's going to be worth your time and money to do it? My guess is to be a vendor at a Magiccon is probably really expensive from a vendor standpoint. There's probably conventions that are way more accessible and easy for them to get into. So, but I would love to see I'd love to see an even bigger vendor area
Right.
with options that were more than just people selling cards. That was just, and any kind of magic adjacent paraphernalia. Again, there was more of that. I want to see
Definitely
that
more
bar
than last
continue
year.
to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. But I'd like to see that bar continue to move up.
Oh, I 100% agree. So I think that's all the negative things that we really have to say about it, which is honestly astounding. The fact that the negative things were, it was hard to find to see. We would have liked to see more vendors, but like other than that, like that's a win in my book. So let's get into some of our memorable games. What was one of the most memorable game moments that you had?
So I think I don't know if I'm gonna steal one of yours, but we played a lot of games together.
Oh, of
So
course.
there, as we often do. So this one comes up a lot. But there was an instance where we were sitting at a table and a one of the people who was kind of officiating. They are kind of serving as the
Yeah.
judges of this very casual place. And they came up and suggested that they asked us how serious the game was, and we hadn't even started yet, and everybody was like, "Well, we're up for something," and they put kind of prize tickets on the table and suggested that we treat the game in this different way, that we add this different element to the game, where every land that we play becomes is a black lotus when it enters the battlefield instead of a land.
That
So it
was
really
pretty cool.
like hyper speeds the game, but it also
It
like
changes the math very differently.
immediately it because we had 100 questions immediately, because it's like, oh, this actually breaks it changes so much.
Hmm.
Not just, it's not as easy to implement as you think it is, and that's true about significant changes to the dynamic of the game. But we figured it out for the most part, and we just had conversations about it, and we agreed with the table. But boy, was it like explosive and ridiculous, and the things that happened were so powerful very, very
Yep.
quickly. It really did feel like, rocket launcher commander, where we just
Yeah.
all had bazookas from the gate, and it became it was very, very fast and very, very powerful. But everybody was down for it
Oh
too.
yeah.
And it became this very fun experience, I think, for everybody who was at the table. That was very memorable for me.
Yeah. And of course, the interesting thing about that is if you have a commander with three colors, uh, it's a lot harder to cast your
Right,
commander.
Black Lotus. Yeah, Black Lotus doesn't feel so good all of a
No,
sudden.
no, it
Yeah.
really didn't. It was definitely a very interesting game. Of course, my friend Tim over here, Tim over here won the game. It was a very cool way to die. Just safe to
And
say.
and that was one of the games, and I guess I should mention this, because it is something that we've talked about in the past. So I have an Izuri Stalker of Spheres deck, and this is the Izuri that proliferates. And I built the deck around poison counters,
Mhm.
and I'm always gun shy about playing the deck, because I think that there's still this kind of stigma against infect and against losing to poison counters. But really, my experience in the last year has been, it doesn't really seem to be there anymore. Like, people just aren't. I haven't met anybody who was salty at all about playing against the deck that was trying to win with poison, as this deck does. And I do think it's at least slightly different, because I'm not trying to attack you with a giant infect creature most
Right.
of the time. I'm just trying to give everybody a poison counter and then proliferate them to death. And but I played that deck. I think I might actually have gotten 3 games in with it, and it had a winning rate. I think I won 2 out of the 3 games I played with it. and it was a lot of fun to play because it is a lot of fun to pilot. And everybody was cool with it. It
Yeah.
is a way to win, and nobody was fussy about it at all. So that deck was, I think, uniquely suited to use that Black Lotus mechanic effectively. Because of a couple, and I also just got the cards that I needed, and things worked out well for me. But boy, that was a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah. So the one guy was playing his Windgrace deck. I was playing Bilbo Birthday Celebrant, and I forget what the other guy was playing, but it was an interesting deck because we ended
I
up
think it was
playing
a mono black deck. Was it Carrick?
No, that was the third game that kid played.
I see.
I'm trying to think. It was the guy that actually ended up having us sign a card because he was like, whenever I play someone with this deck, I have him sign a card. It was like his group hugs deck, and then like the one game, the second game that we had with him, this was after the Black Lotus game. I had ramped out to a Felidar Guardian just because I don't know why. I had a Felidar
forgot
Guardian,
about the Felidar Guardian.
and then he
Yep.
fractured identity'd it, and then the guy next to him won, and it was like, okay, we're gonna just wrap the. Oh yeah, he played Heartbeat of Spring, and I'm like, oh, I might as well play this 6-drop.
And then it comes back to him, and he's
And then
fractured identity.
fractured
and just
identity.
gives the next person the
Yep.
game.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. So,
Well, that just reminds me though. Like before he did that, he did the thing that I love. I do this, and I love it when other people do it as well. Where they basically they tell the table like, "Hey, listen, I have a ridiculous thing that I could do, and it probably is going to end the game. So I'm just going to stop here and say, how do we feel about that?" And you and I are always the kind of players that say, do it.
Do it for the content, baby.
Please do it, because like that is what we are here for. Like, don't hold back. And I really think this is an attitude that we have kind of cultivated lately, and it's been very positive to just encourage people to be a little, I don't, competitive's not the word, but to like do what your deck is supposed to do. You don't have to hold back or be so fun. And by giving other people permission to do it, in some ways, it gives us permission to do it as well.
Right.
And I think that like we're finding this beautiful sweet spot of between casual and competitive, where it is like we're still gonna play high power, we're still gonna do really like dramatic things, and we're just gonna encourage each other to do it. So whoever ends up doing the dramatic thing first, we just cheer for them, and then everybody's having a good time.
Right. So my memorable game, I have to go back to it because I actually want to get into the details of the game because actually, Tim, you weren't there to witness this game. This game was actually kind of interesting. So I'm playing with Saffron Olive. He's on my team, and then there was this mono wipe, like board wipe dot deck, because he had I forget the name of the commander, but he's I can see his art, and he's from Prophecy. But like you can discard 2 cards and pay a certain amount of mana.
Magetta the Lion.
That's the one. Yeah. So he's playing that.
That's the commander?
Yeah, as the commander, yeah. I actually felt bad for that kid, but I'll get to that in a moment. So Seth was playing his food deck with Frodo and Samwise. And I'm playing my Garth, and I'm sitting in the middle. So that means I can't get attacked, which is exactly what Garth wants. And I can target the 2 lieutenants, but I can't target the guy right in front of me. So the 2 lieutenants were playing my deck. So there was Indominus Rex Alpha over on my right side, Kraken's on the left side, and then I don't even remember what the guy in the middle was playing. But it turns out my deck was a lot better than absolutely everyone else's deck. So I played a Smothering Tithe on turn 4, I think it was. Maybe it was turn 3. I ramped and then played Smothering Tithe. And when you get 3 treasures, like right off the bat, you can then finale for a huge number with no max. So I finale'd for 10 on like turn 4 or 5 or something like that. So then I untapped all my lands, drew 10 cards, and had no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. So like for the whole entire game, I had probably 20 cards in my hand, pretty much the whole game. Uh, and I felt bad for the guy on my left because he's like, oh well, I can do this, like I can board wipe. I'm like, well, that would hurt us more than it would hurt them because like he was getting beat down by my Krakens. Like the one time that my Kraken deck does actually really good, like is when it was in someone else's hands.
Right.
This was before the
Of course.
upgrade. So, you know, he's going off, and I'm like, well, I'm just going to have to Cyclonic Rift Overload everyone here. So, like, the guy on my left really didn't do anything. Seth ends up playing a Aether Flux Reservoir and is sitting at 51 and was, like, using it as a nuclear deterrent because he was like, I can just target the Emperor and end the game now. But he was like, I really want to see how this door deck wins. So he was like, I'm just going to sit here and I want to see the door explode in his face. And I ended up not being able to do it because I ended up putting myself down to 6 life with Belladros because it's a great card and I'm like, I want to do all the things. So I end up getting down to 6 life and this other guy's like, oh, I'm going to play Impact Tremors. I was like, Seth, you're going to have to nuke him. I'm sorry. I don't want to die. So then he ends up nuking him, getting put down to 1, and then we ended up winning a game. So it was a little anticlimactic on the fact that, like, since you only have to kill the one player in order for the game to end. But it was really cool. And like, you know, afterwards he's like, I wanna sign a card that was had the most effect on the game. So I got a Belladros here, signed by Saffron Olive here. And it was one of the coolest things ever. Like he gave me his contact information because I asked him, you know, it would be awesome to have him on my show. So like it was the coolest thing ever. That was the most memorable game I had, but I did end up playing a lot of games. I did play Windgrace once, and it turns out that deck is also really, really, really disgusting as well.
Yeah, I think you have to start calling that deck a 9. I really do. Like,
yeah.
I think I know that we usually reserve 9 for like low powered CEDH, but like really in the context of like what is and technically you do have some fast mana in that deck.
I do. Yeah.
So really, like I think the only thing that stops it from being like formidable CEDH is that that's not a commander that I think really kind of that people would normally choose in
Right.
that format or in that kind of subset. But power level wise, it's definitely up there, and it's also as you've demonstrated so many times playing it, it's just so hard to interact with. Like you get rid of Windgrace, and then you're like, oh great, I have enough mana to cast him again several more times.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted you to do.
And to some extent, it's not even necessarily a bad thing because it resets his loyalty counters. It's like it's really, really tough. Like somebody has to hate on you from the get to slow you down, and even then, it's still just incredibly powerful.
Well, so the Windgrace game that I ended up playing, you were there for that, and I think it was. I had a choice. I was like, I can either wait a turn and Torment of Hailfire for super lethal, or I can Torment of Hailfire for like 9 on like turn 4. So I chose to Torment of Hailfire on turn 4 just because I thought that would have. I mean, we're talking like I still won the game, but like it could have been more distinct. And like it's interesting how like when you go through games where it's like, okay, I won anyway, but like how could I have done that better? And I don't know how healthy that is.
Well, I don't know that I agree that you could have done it better, because the reason that you did it, if you remember, is the player immediately after you was playing in control deck.
Yeah.
And it was very clear that that person did it. We saw several counter spells in that game. And I think part of what influenced your decision to play the Torment when you did was that he was very clearly tapped down.
Right.
And like had very few, like if any, like 1 or 2 cards in his hand. And it was like, I could understand the feeling of it's probably now or never. And so I'm going to do it now because it is still going to set everybody back to the Stone Age. And you did end up winning as a result. So and there's a real possibility that you go around you let it go around once and you cast it for a game winning amount.
Countered.
It gets countered.
Yeah.
So really, like, we can play the Mr. Destiny game where we go back and try to change the line and see if it's better, but you just don't really know. And I actually like that was a pod that I thought was really memorable
Oh,
because we
dude, I
played
love that pod. We played like
three games with those
yeah,
guys.
3 or 4.
Was it more than that? It was quite a lot, and we all played at several
Yeah,
different decks, and we did different things.
my
And really
Dino
like
deck
I
did
think
literally nothing.
I think that the skill level of those players and the power level of their decks was a very good matchup for
Yep.
us. So it really, again, that felt like Rocket Launcher Commander, where we
Mhm.
were all, but we all started with rocket launchers. So that feels really good when
Right.
you accidentally end up in a pod that's power level actually lines up with yours. They don't just say that it does; it really, really
Yeah,
does.
their skill
Um,
level was like not to say we're the world's best Magic players in the world, even though that's exactly what I'm doing because we are.
yeah.
But like we've been playing for a very long time, so our skill level is on the higher side of things, and it was nice to
Mhm.
play with people that were like on par, if not even better players than us. Like
Right.
so it was just nice to have that you know synergy of like play levels. And it's really cool, by the way. I'm jumping back to the old story. This is really cool. It's really cool when Saffron Olive was like, I think I'm going to do this and this, and then ask you for your opinion. It's like nice.
Well, what I love about that is it reminds us that these people that we idolize in whatever way that we idolize them are probably just people, and you really just you see it at events like this, and I absolutely love that. I
Mhm.
love kind of pulling back the veil and seeing people just being people and remembering that, especially when it comes to this, when especially it comes to the content creators who are doing Magic content, we are absolutely 100% just human beings who really love this game and we're overly enthusiastic about it. We have the ways and means to do what we do in terms of putting a camera on and talking about what we like, but that doesn't actually make us any better than anybody else. And that's why it's really nice to see to have those human interactions is very, very rewarding.
Yeah. Um so what are some goals for future Magic Cons that we will inevitably attend?
Let's see. My goals for future Magicons. I think I mean, this question's tough. I think because I'm very curious to know where they're going to be,
Mhm.
right? Because where they are is going to have a pretty big impact on what we do with the trip as a whole, but also with
Yes.
the time that we are there. And obviously, like our journey as yeah, as kind of amateur content creators or at least new content creators, that's going to influence where we land as well. But one thing does come to mind, and it is we did this both of these experiences. We showed up on day one and we go and we register and we do the thing, and then day two being Saturday, we're there all day, we get a real full experience, and then on day three we go and we sit there for the first half of the day, we get a couple of things in, but then we got to bounce. I'd really like to spend that whole third day. And
I agree.
I say that because this is reinforced by something that one of the EDH guys said when he said that he would be that he was planning on spending the third day, planning on spending Sunday, spending as much time in the command zone as possible, getting in games with fans and other players. And it occurred to me that, if I were a popular content creator, I would probably do the same thing. You get all your business out of the way in the first 2 days, and then on day three, you can actually just have fun,
Yep.
spend time with people. So my feeling is that if you really want to get games in, with the content creators, that third day is probably the sweet spot of when to do it. And I could be off on that, but I suspect that is the case. But I really I would extend it that additional day. And I say this actually in my real life, like my real life. I say this
Yeah.
with other vacation things, that if you're gonna go and do a thing, you really want to have the fullest possible experience, you should plan to be on the ground for 3 full days.
Right.
So that's a 5 day cycle. Travel on 1, travel on 5, 3 days on the ground. And we've made it 4 day trips both times, where we traveled on day 1, we're there for days 2 and 3, and spent a little bit of time on 4, then traveled back. And I think that we lose a little bit of value by doing it that way. And I think
I agree. Yeah, I was gonna say that was like my goal. Well, my first goal for next year is to actually get my own content creator badge. Even though I would still probably buy a whole weekend badge anyway. But like I feel like that would just put like stripes on my shoulders. Like I earned my place to be here kind of thing. I think it's more of like a pride thing than anything. But would love to get my own content creator badge, and I 100% agree. I think day 3 felt like kind of a waste because like I think all I did on day 3 was I spent some money, and I would love to have get more signatures, like more signatures, play a few games, stay the night, and then drive all day because like we drove from Chicago to, or from like Philly to Chicago. We took my Tesla. So normally it would be a 10-hour drive. It turned out to be a 14-hour drive because you have to stop and charge your car like every 2 hours for 45 minutes. And it I didn't get home until 5 a.m. on Monday morning. So
Yeah. So moving that back and making it so we're just launching from because the trip on day 1's not so bad. I mean,
day 1 was
really
great. Like I was good the whole time.
Right. And so that's a big change. So you reminded me of another thing that I really wanted to I now I'm gonna forget it now that I said it out loud. What did I want to talk about?
Well, I have one more thing that I've been cured from my burger problem. Okay, so
the burger problem.
The burger problem, yeah. So last year we went to BurgerFi. The restaurant was absolutely atrocious. Didn't like anything that happened there. And then on the last day, we were like, let's get some food before we leave Chicago, because I feel like you kind of have to get real Chicago food while in Chicago. So we went to the restaurant that was attached to the hotel, and I decided to get a burger, and it was absolutely delicious. It was one of the best burgers I've ever had. So I'm gonna go ahead and say I've been cured from my emotional trauma from Philly, and hopefully I can, live that down and heal from it.
It reminded me that as far as the content creator badges thing goes, I do think that I actually do think we probably already qualify, and I don't know what that actually means in terms of like what access you get and what you get to do, but I still very much think that the barrier for entry to do it. But I understand that there is a stripes on the shoulder or kind of feather in the cap feeling that comes along as a result of that, and I think that I think that that's I definitely I don't know that we would have to do the other things if we got that one, because I just don't know what it comes along with. But it definitely, it'd be interesting to see as things progress what what we're going to be able to do, and that's a big part of that's a big part of the equation in the future is when the next one happens, where is it going to be, how easy is it going to be for us to get there, and if it once we are there, what is that going to look like for us? Right. Are we going to be at a position where we are able to act as content creators and get to do the things that they do, even the lesser known ones? Are we going to get to
there was a content creator corner that was really cool, where they had like scheduled time where like every 2 hours it would change, and you would just walk around and talk to every single one of them. Dude, I hovered around that content creator table like so much. So, hopefully we're cool enough that we can have our own little like 2 hour section there. And
yeah, I would love to do that, because boy, do I love talking to people in that context. Like, right. I love getting to meet people in that way. So that is a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it looks like we're gonna start moving towards our wrap up for today. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the future of our content now that we've summarized what Magiccon Chicago is like. So for those too long didn't read, TLDR, it was a lot of fun. The event was thrown really well. everything about it, seemed to be, it addressed a lot of the problems that we had with the previous one. And other than being a pretty long, far away from us trip, we still had an enormous amount of fun being there. So as far as the future of our content, Zombie and I spent a lot of time, because we had 28 hours in a car together, talking about what the future is going to look like for us. And obviously, we've had a lot of fun doing the podcast in the past year, and we want to continue to do that. Zombie and I also play spelltable with people online. I play a lot of Arena, and I've made a very tiny little bit of content doing that, but I would like to start doing that more. So we're gonna kind of softly announce here for the six listeners that we have.
Yep. Thank you much.
Thank you, and of course, thank you. That we are going to kind of move our brand in a new direction, starting in the very near future. So we are planning to start a new YouTube channel under a new unified name, and that name is Head Games. And we are going to Zombie's gonna plan to stream on that YouTube channel. I might do that as well if I could work streaming into my schedule. But the big plan is to upload all of our content, including our podcast, including our Commander games with randos on spelltable, Arena content videos, and what any other new things that we come up with along the way, all in the same place. So that if you're looking for our content, either of us, both of us, you'll be able to go to the same place to do that.
So it's just a goal to create a team-based brand instead of Zombie Apocalypse is who I am, and the AZA Commander podcast was just like a offshoot of my brand. When without Tim, this podcast wouldn't exist either. So I wanted to make sure that it was known that it wasn't just mine. It is both of ours. I don't want to take sole credit for anything like that. So that's the reason why we wanted to do the team-based brand. We're hoping to launch this in early April. So this episode will be on my YouTube channel, and on all the podcast listening apps as well. I do plan on uploading onto the Zombie Apocalypse channel for the foreseeable future as well. So like if you're subscribed to me on YouTube there, you will see a few episodes of the Head Games podcast on this channel as well. And then we'll eventually just leave it to just the Head Games channel. And then if you are subscribed to the AZA Commander podcast on any of your podcast listening apps, you don't have to do anything, because I'm just going to change everything to Head Games from my side of things. So it will just change into the Head Games podcast. Really? Stop moving. Anyway, so that's the plan for the foreseeable future. I'm really looking forward to having a new brand, getting honestly, it's motivating me to do so much more for this. I really want to get back into uploading Commander with randos with actual editing and all these other changes and stuff like that. It's just motivating me to do better and do more. So I think this is the right move for everybody.
So I tasked a friend of mine who may or may not ever get to hear this part of the conversation, being at the very end of a long podcast. But I tasked a friend of mine who is a graphic designer with helping us design some logos and banners and things of that nature, kind of work on branding stuff. And I mentioned to them that I had gone to Magiccon Chicago and had this really long car ride with my friend who I'm already kind of making content with, and that we had come up with this idea for a new brand. And we have to tell the listeners that the way that Zombie came up with this name is that it's in honor of the first LGS that you ever played at, right?
Yeah. So I have a lot of memories from that place. So
when you said that to me, I'm and it was first thought, best thought. We were just starting to spitball meme ideas, and that one immediately, first one that Zombie said, and immediately like that's it. And we'll have to look and see if it's something that's realistic for us to use. But I love everything about it. Look it up. It is actually a magic card. It's not a particularly good one. It's certainly not a good commander one, and it's probably terrible. You couldn't play it on spell table.
right.
And it's also a song by Foreigner, but we don't have to go there either. But I very much love that it is an homage to the first store. Mine's base is loaded, so it doesn't work as well. Um, so or comics universe after that. So again, still not quite as effective. But anyway, I love the idea of having a unified brand, but I rambled. The point of my story was I asked my friend to help me with the design and stuff, and I told them that we had come up with these ideas while we were at a convention, and their response was just like, yeah, that's what conventions are for.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that's why we started the podcast in the first place. Like, we're walking our way back to the train from Magiccon Philly, and we were like, let's start a podcast. Like, sounds like a fun idea. Like,
and it does do that. So if there's nothing, like, we have to hang a lantern on that and say one of the biggest positive takeaways of going to Magiccon is it has really injected a lot of enthusiasm for us into what we are doing as people who are, who are making content and who are interested in participating in this community in this way. So it really did, because I was feeling a little stuck there, and we went and we had these conversations and we met all these people and we did all these things, and it was very much like, oh no, I want to go harder.
Yep,
I want to do
exactly
more
what we're open
now,
to do. So
and that this is the first step in that direction. We do have a lot of the groundwork already laid in terms of the channel, in terms of like some of the very simple infrastructure. I'm confident that we'll have a lot of the visual stuff ready to go. So timeline wise, we are still very much looking at early April, and then we'll have a better sense in terms of like calendar or schedule of release, how often things are going to come out, and when you can count on seeing a new video of whichever different kind of thing that's coming out.
Yeah, we're looking to do more than just one episode a month is really what we're trying to say here. And we're hoping to shorten them a little bit, so you're not sitting through an hour and 45 minutes of a podcast. You're only sitting through 45 minutes of a podcast, and I think it's more digestible in smaller pieces, even though we're the best content creators of all time. So listening to us for an hour and 45 minutes is easy as can be.
But I'm with you, and we came across this, like, I'm an absorber of media. I'm a fan first and foremost. I watch, listen to, play a lot of different kinds of things, a lot of different content, and I have opinions on what I like and what is effective in terms of time. So we're gonna work on making our stuff kind of fit. This is what I like. So I think if I like it, if I gear what I'm creating in a direction where I like it, that's hopefully going to translate to other people appreciating some of those changes as well. But as far as the calendar and the schedule goes, we are also hopeful, I think, that if you enjoy the podcast, that you may look at our other content. And since it's all in the same place on YouTube, you'll be able to have access to all these different kinds of shows. So the Commander with Rando games, the arena content, the podcast, and then again, whatever other things that we start to work on, you're going to be able to find them all in the same place. And then you won't, even if we're only doing 2 podcasts, we're going to release several other videos over the course of the month, so you'll have these other things to watch in between as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to end the episode today. I think.
Okay, so our friends, our opponents, longtime listeners, first time callers, it's time for us to pack it up one last time, put all our cards back in our suitcases, and start the long drive home. I hope I didn't leave my toothbrush in the hotel again.
You did leave your sunglasses in my car.
I did. Thank you so very kindly for spending time with us on the AZA Commander podcast. We'd like to remind you all that you can support this show, all of our other content, by watching this and other videos on the YouTube, checking out our streams on Twitch. you can find those links as always in the descriptions.
But before we scoop things up, we want to hear from you, the Zombie Horde, and I think you'll still be the Zombie Horde after this. Did you go to Magiccon Chicago yourself? Which content creators would you like to play a game with? And are
And why is it me?
Of course, that's the important part. And are events like Magiccon good for the overall community of Magic the Gathering? And when you go to big events like Magiccon Chicago, how do you choose what commanders to play? Let us know in the comments. And as always, thank you for playing along with us and have a wonderful day. Bye.